where where my father did most of his composing, but he also did composing and writing in the car, because being a captive of Mother's driving, and she would go shopping, he would have to wait in the car. And so those notebooks that, if you do research, where you see his little notebooks where he's writing sketches, such as sketches for the good earth and things like that, were probably written in the car while he was waiting for Mother to finish her shopping.
You know, that reminds me of something. This is not scripted. That reminds me, one time we were in Westwood, and we were in the car, and my daddy was, my mother would drive. She would go into a store, and she would go on, I said, on, and she'd not come back after a while. And he'd be waiting, and I was in the back seat, we call this, and he was sitting in the front, and he had his sketchbook, and he was writing, and it was taking, whatever, it was supposed to be 10 minutes, and it probably was taking 15 or 20 or 30 minutes. And finally, she came back, and she, at that time, it wasn't the way you started the car, you had to push the starter button, key and then the starter button, push the starter button, and this incredible din, just amazing noise from the car. And turned it off, tried it again, same horrible noise, 3 or 4 times, and then finally people came over and they were looking all around and figured it out, and they pulled up the hood and they looked around and they couldn't discover what it was, but they had turned it off and nobody, and then somebody came and they looked around. Another person got in the car, I remember, because I was in the back seat and watched. And what it was my father, who was oblivious to all this going on, he was doing his little work, but he had his foot on the accelerator. Easy to solve.
Can I just say
yeah.
one thing about it? Still has to do with cars in a way, and it's something that I tell young people who can't even imagine this in the day of computers and everyone being able to print everything at home, or at least in a photocopy place. In those days, if our father had to send a copy of music or anything, a letter, anything, if you needed, they didn't have photocopies, we had to drive out to Glendale, which was like, what, an hour and a half
right.
drive at that time, to go to what was a blueprint shop and leave the things there and then drive back like the next day or the next week or something to receive these copies. And these are the kind of things that people can't even imagine anymore. We have this really immediate...
yeah, it's so easy now to travel from one city to another and go through the... He actually did a serious work where, when we reflect on how we responded to the question that's often posed is, could you go in that room? And I thought, yeah, we can go in whenever I wanted. And Mary says, oh, no, we couldn't. So I must have not known that I wasn't supposed to go in there. But in that room, the thing, what I remember very well is what that arrow is actually pointing to. And it was a little cartoon that was up there where it describes Arnold Schoenberg works at a long table in his bedroom, undisturbed by the background clatter of 3 playing children, a St. Bernard, and several scampering pet rabbits.
Good.
Yeah. I don't remember. I only knew it when I was trying to play the violin, screeching. Do you have any, Nerea, do you have any specific recollections of the room?
Yeah, well.
Yeah. There's some interesting things that came from the next room over.
I'm not going to comment on the diagram.
On the diagram?
I mean, on the falsity of what's said there. There was no room in his bed. There was no long table in his. It's like a lot of the things you hear about it. There's no long table in the bedroom. The rabbits were always outside in the hutch, and I don't think we were allowed to scamper around when he was composing. But
No, you're right.
There, as most of the people in here know already, that he used razor blades from January 1942 till November 1943, and then tilt your head the other way, in 2 to 3 years, these will be good again.
We had the idea that the metal would evaporate, and that would make them
Okay.
sharp again.
Okay, but, just a minute, don't, if you, well, there was some, I mean, it's empirical, somehow he must have experienced something with an old razor blade in his nose. Better shape. Remember, those are not the razor blades of today with 12 different little. It's just a single old Gillette razor blade, double-edged. And we have to Google this, right? You have to Google, razor blade, whatever, and what happens. There's a few keywords to see what happens if you leave them out for a while. And somewhere I did read something somewhere. Well, 2 things. One of them I want to dismiss, where it said if you put it on a pyramid, you get better. Let's leave that one aside. But the other one, which was more scientific, said something about the idea of as the moisture, as it dries out, then it somehow reconstitutes it, and the razor blade will become better. So.
This is also something that when we show it to people, they think, well, why didn't he just go to the drugstore or the stationery store and buy a regular dispenser for his Scotch tape? But they didn't have those in those days, that you would just buy the little roll. And he often made birthday presents, not only for us kids, but also for our Uncle Rudolph Kolisch. He made a beautiful traveling chess set for him, and this was a collapsible music stand, which comes up to a sort of normal height, but which can be collapsed together into a very small space.
You want to talk about the games that we played?
We played a lot of games in the evening with our parents, and this is what you see up there is the roulette thing made by my father. Also chips, and the wooden chips that he made, the amounts on them. We would spend hours playing this in the evening. We went to the fake gambling. In the bottom, well, we'll have a bigger view of that later, is a game that he made for me out of wood, where you have the vertical and the horizontal numbers, and you line them up with one space. A lot of games and things of that nature. We spent a lot of time doing what we call the favorite Napoleon Trolley. You know that one, where you set it up. There's a cellar, and you try to get all the cards in the middle. And usually you can sort of figure out the game right from the beginning. You know whether you're going to win or lose by looking ahead. He loved that game. He didn't like my kibitzing. We also played chess occasionally out there, and that was on the next, unless you want to say more about the cards.
He wrote a whole story about Napoleon playing this. It's actually a dialogue between Napoleon and one of his aides, in which, because it seems that Napoleon played this solitaire, and if he won the solitaire, he was sure that he would win the next battle. And so there was also something of this sort in the
This is a copy of the cards that actually have been produced that Ronnie mentioned, but yeah. We don't need to spend that much time on these. Are some of the chess pieces, but this is a preview for tomorrow's presentation, so you'll see and hear and know all about that.